Chapter 11 of the Enchanted Barn. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Gail Mattern. The Enchanted Barn by Grace Livingston Hill. Chapter 11. Shirley was awake early that morning, almost too excited to sleep, but fitfully even through the night. Now that the thing was done, and they were actually moved into a barn, she began to have all sorts of fears and compunctions concerning it. She seemed to see her delicate mother shrink as from a blow when she first learned that they had come to this. Try as she would to bring back all the sensible philosophy that had caused her to enter into this affair in the first place, she simply could not feel anything but trouble. She longed to rush into her mother's room, tell her all about it, and get the dreaded episode over. But anyhow, it was inevitable now. They were moved. They had barely enough money to pay the cartage and get things started before next payday. There was nothing for it but to take her mother there, even if she did shrink from the idea. Of course, mother had always been sensible and all that, but somehow the burden of the great responsibility of decision rested so heavily upon her young shoulders that morning that it seemed as if she could no longer bear the strain. They still had a good fire in the kitchen range, and Shirley hastened to the kitchen, prepared a delicate piece of toast, a poached egg, a cup of tea, and took it to her mother's room, tiptoeing lightly lest she still slept. But the mother was awake and glad to see her. She had been awake since the first streak of dawn had crept into the little back window. She had the look of one who was girded for the worst. But when she saw her daughter's face, the mother in her triumphed over the woman. " What's the trouble, little girl? Has something happened?" The tenderness in her voice was the last straw that broke Shirley's self-control. The tears suddenly sprang into her eyes, and her lip trembled. " Oh, mother !" she wailed, setting the tray down quickly on a box and fumbling for her handkerchief. " I'm so worried. I'm so afraid you won't like what we've done, and then what shall we do?" " I shall like it !" said mother with instant determination. " Don't for a minute think of anything else. Having done something irrevocably, never look back and think you might have done something better. You did the best you could, or you thought you did anyway, and there didn't seem to be anything else at the time. So now just consider it was the very best thing in the world, and don't go to fretting about it. There'll be something nice about it, I'm sure, and goodness knows we've had enough unpleasant things here, so we needn't expect beds of roses. We are just going to make it nice, little girl. Remember that. We are going to like it. There's a tree there, you say. So when we find things we don't like, we'll just go out and look up at our tree and say, 'We've got you, anyway, and we're glad of it.'" "You blessed little mother!" laughed Shirley, wiping her tears away. " I just believe you will like it, maybe, after all, though I've had a lot of compunctions all night. I wondered if maybe I oughtn't to have told you all about it, only I knew you couldn't really judge at all until you had seen it yourself, and we wanted to surprise you." " Well, I'm determined to be surprised," said the brave little woman, " so don't you worry. We're going to have a grand good time to day. Now run along. It's almost time for your car, and you haven't had any breakfast yet." Shirley kissed her mother and went smiling down to eat her breakfast and hurry away to the office. There was a big rush of work at the office, or Shirley would have asked for a half holiday, but she did not dare endanger her position by making a request at so busy a season. She was glad that the next day was Sunday, and they would have a whole day to themselves in the new home before she would have to hurry away to the office again. It would serve to make it seem less lonely for her mother, having them all home that first day. She meant to work fast to day and get all the letters written before 5 if possible. Then she would have time to get home a few minutes before Graham arrived with his car and see that her mother was all comfortably ready. It was a good deal to put upon Carol to look after everything. It wasn't as if they had neighbors to help out a little, for they were the very last tenants in the doomed block to leave. All the others had gone 2 or 3 weeks before. Thinking over again all the many details for the day, Shirley walked down to the office through the sunshine. It was growing warm weather, and her coat felt oppressive already. She was so thankful that her mother would not have to sleep in those breathless rooms after the heat began. The doctor had said that her mother needed rest and air and plenty of sunshine more than anything else. She would at least have those at the barn, and what did other things matter, after all? Mother was game. Mother wouldn't let herself feel badly over such a silly thing. They certainly were going to be more comfortable than they had been for several years. Think of that wonderful electric light! And clear, cold water from the spring. Oh, it was great! And a little thrill of ecstasy passed over her, the first she had let herself feel since she had taken the great responsibility of transplanting her family to a barn. After all, the day passed very quickly, and when at 4:30 the telephone bell rang and Graham's voice announced that he would be down at the street door waiting for her in half an hour, that she needn't hurry, he would wait till she was ready, her heart gave a little jump of joy. It was as if school was out and she was going on a real picnic like other girls. How nice of him! How perfectly lovely of him! And yet there hadn't been anything but the nicest friendliness in his voice, such as any kindly disposed landlord might use if he chose. Nothing that she need feel uncomfortable about. At least there was the relief that after to night mother would know all about it, and if she didn't approve Shirley could decline any further kindness, of course. And now she was just going to take mother's advice and forget everything but the pleasant part. At home Carol and Harley bustled about in the empty house like two excited bumblebees, washing up the few dishes, putting in an open box everything that had been left out for their last night's sleeping, getting lunch, and making mother take a nap. Doris, vibrating between her mother's room and downstairs, kept singing over to herself: "We goin' to country, we goin' to country, see birdies and twees and walk on green grass." After lunch was over and the dishes were put carefully into the big box between comfortables and blankets, Carol helped her mother to dress, and then made her lie down and take a good long nap with Doris asleep by her side. After that Carol and Harley tiptoed down to the bare kitchen and sat on a box side by side to converse. " Gee, ain't you tired, Carol?" said the boy, pushing his hair back from his hot face. " Gee, don't it seem funny we aren't coming back here any more? It kind of gets my goat I shan't see the fellow so often, but it'll be great to ask him to see us sometimes. Say, do you suppose we really can keep chickens?" " Sure !" said Carol convincingly. " I asked Mr. Graham if we might. George said we ought to. He was such a good scout you'd want to be sure he'd like it. And he said sure, it would be great. He'd like to come out and see them sometimes. He said he used to keep chickens himself when he was a kid, and he shouldn't wonder if they had a few too many at their place they could spare to start with. He told me he'd look it up and see soon's we got settled." " Gee ! He's a peach, isn't he? Say, has he got a case on Shirl?" " I don't know," said the girl thoughtfully. " Maybe he has, but he doesn't know it yet, I guess. But anyhow, you must promise me you will never breathe such a word. Why, Shirley would just bust right up if you did. I said a little something to her like that once. It wasn't much, only just that he was awfully nice, and I guess he liked her by the way he looked at her, and she just fairly froze. You know the way her eyes get when she's sore at us? And she said I must never, never even think anything like that, or she would give the place right up and get a few rooms down on South Street and stay in the city all summer. She said Mr. Graham was a gentleman, and she was only a working girl, and it would be a disgrace for her to accept any favors from him except what she could pay for, and an insult for him to offer them, because she was only a working girl and he was a gentleman, you know." " growled Harley. " I guess our sister's as good as he is any day." " Of course !" snapped Carol. " But then he might not think so." " Well, if he don't, he can go to thunder !" bristled Harley wrathfully. " I'm not going to have him looking down on Shirley. She's as good as his baby doll sister with her pink cheeks and her little white hands and her high heels and airs any day. She's a nut, she is." " Harley, you stop !" declared Carol, getting wrathful. " Elizabeth's a dear, and you're not going to talk about her that way. Just because she is pretty and doesn't have to work." " Well, you said her brother looked down on our sister," declared Harley. " I did not. I only said he might. I only meant that was the way some gentlemen would. I only said people kind of expect gentlemen to do that." " Not if they're real gentlemen, they won't. And anyhow, he won't. If I find him looking down on my sister Shirley, I'll punch his face for him. Yes, I will. I'm not afraid. George and I could beat the stuffing out of him, and we will if he does any looking down stunts, and don't you forget it." " Well, I'm sure he doesn't," said Carol pacifically, trying to put a soothing sound into her voice as wise elder sisters learn to do. " You see, if he did look down on her, Shirley would know it. Right away she'd know it. Nobody would have to tell her. She'd see it in his voice and smile and everything. And if he had, she wouldn't have gone out there to live in the place he owns, you know. So I guess you can trust Shirley. I think he's been just dandy. fixing up that fireplace and stairs